She was just trying to survive, raising her little girl alone, scraping by one day at a time. But when she offered a warm meal to a stranger no one else would look at, everything in her life began to change. Kindness turned into scandal, whispers turned into shame, and yet, the bond between them only grew stronger. But then her world shattered. The man she trusted wasn't homeless at all. He was a billionaire, secretly testing her heart. Was her kindness about to destroy her reputation forever? Or would it become the one thing that saves them all? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The evening chill crept through Grace Miller's thin waitress uniform as she counted her tips for the third time, hoping the numbers would somehow change. They didn't. $28.15, barely enough for tomorrow's groceries. She sighed, tucking the worn bills into her purse with trembling fingers. The diner's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the empty tables she'd just finished wiping down. Her feet ached from the 12-hour shift, and her lower back screamed for rest. But there was no time for that, not when Lily needed new shoes for school and the electric bill was due next week. "Mommy, look! I drew us having a picnic in the park." Lily's cheerful voice cut through Grace's worried thoughts. Her 8-year-old daughter sat at the corner booth, her favorite spot, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. Grace's heart squeezed with love and guilt. Lily had waited so patiently all evening, entertaining herself with her art supplies, while Grace served countless customers, many who left mere pocket change as tips. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," she managed, forcing warmth into her voice. "Is that a butterfly above the trees?" "Uh-huh. And look, I drew Daddy watching us from heaven." Lily pointed to a smiling stick figure, floating among cotton candy clouds. The innocent observation made Grace's throat tight. 2 years had passed since John's accident, but moments like these still caught her off guard. "He'd love that, baby." Grace gathered Lily's supplies, carefully placing the drawing on top. "Ready to head home? We need to get you in bed soon. It's a school night." Lily nodded, pulling on her purple backpack. It was last year's model, but Grace had managed to patch the worn spots. "Can we have hot chocolate when we get home? Pretty please?" Grace did a quick mental calculation. The cocoa mix was almost empty, but there should be enough for one more cup. "Just a small one," she agreed, helping Lily into her jacket. The zipper stuck halfway up, another item that needed replacing. The bell above the door chimed as they stepped outside. The autumn wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of dying leaves and wood smoke. Grace pulled her coat tighter, wishing she'd remembered to grab her scarf that morning. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for her ancient Honda Civic and a few other cars belonging to the closing staff. "Mommy, my hands are cold," Lily whispered, slipping her small fingers into Grace's palm. The touch anchored Grace, reminding her why she pushed through these long days. For Lily, she'd work 112-hour shifts if needed. They were halfway to their car when Grace noticed him. A man sat hunched on the curb near the diner's back entrance, his shoulders curved against the wind. His coat was thin and patched, his shoes held together with duct tape. Something about his posture spoke of dignity, despite his circumstances. He wasn't begging or making a scene, just trying to find shelter from the bitter wind. Grace hesitated. She'd seen many homeless people during her years working at the diner, and the owner's policy was clear: don't encourage them to stay. But something about this man touched her heart. Maybe it was the way he kept his head bowed, as if trying to make himself invisible. Or maybe it was how the streetlight caught the silver in his hair, reminding her of her own father. "Who's that, Mommy?" Lily asked, her voice carrying the innocent curiosity of childhood. "Someone who looks like they're having a rough time," Grace answered softly. She glanced at her purse, thinking of those $28. The responsible thing would be to walk straight to her car. She had Lily to think about, bills to pay. But then she remembered something her mother used to say: "Grace, when you help others, you're really helping yourself. It reminds your heart what truly matters." Making her decision, Grace squeezed Lily's hand. "Wait here a moment, sweetheart." She walked back to the diner's side entrance, using her key to slip inside. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of the heating lamps, but she knew her way around by heart. Working quickly, she filled a takeout container with leftover meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans, food that would otherwise be thrown out at closing. She added an extra roll and a pat of butter, then grabbed a plastic fork and napkins. Her hands shook slightly as she snapped the container closed, but her heart felt steady. Back outside, Lily watched with wide eyes as Grace approached the man. Up close, she could see his clothes were clean despite being worn, and his gray hair was neatly combed. He looked up as she neared, and Grace was struck by the clarity in his blue eyes. They held no anger or desperation, just a deep weariness. "Excuse me, sir," Grace said gently, holding out the container. "I thought you might like something warm to eat." The man stared at the offering for a long moment, then met her gaze. His voice, when he spoke, carried an unexpected gentleness. "That's very kind of you, ma'am. It's nothing fancy, just some leftovers from the diner," Grace explained, suddenly feeling awkward. "But it's still warm." His weathered hands accepted the container with careful dignity. "Thank you. This means more than you know." Grace nodded, stepping back. "Take care of yourself. It's getting cold out here." She turned away quickly, not wanting to embarrass him with too much attention. Lily was waiting exactly where she'd left her, bouncing slightly on her toes to stay warm. "That was nice, Mommy," Lily whispered as they walked to the car. "Like when Jesus said to help people who are hungry, right?" Grace's eyes stung with unexpected tears. Even with all their struggles, she'd somehow raised a daughter who understood what mattered most. "That's right, baby. Sometimes people just need a little kindness." As she helped Lily into the car, Grace caught a glimpse of the man carefully opening the container, steam rising in the chilly air. She might only have $28 to her name, but in that moment she felt remarkably rich. Chapter 2. A Stranger at the Diner. Chapter 1. Scene 2. The morning sun barely peeked through the clouds as Grace rushed through their small apartment, gathering Lily's scattered school supplies. Her daughter sat at their tiny kitchen table, spooning cereal into her mouth while attempting to braid her own hair. "Here, sweetheart, let me help." Grace's fingers moved swiftly, weaving Lily's brown curls into a neat plait. "We're running a bit late today." "Because you gave away my second braid ribbon to that man last night?" Lily asked innocently. Grace paused, remembering how she'd offered the spare hair tie along with the meal, noticing how the man's long hair kept falling in his face. "Sometimes small kindnesses matter most," Grace said, securing the braid with their last ribbon. "Now, backpack check? Homework folder? Check. Library book? Check. Lunch money?" Grace pressed the carefully counted coins into Lily's palm, trying not to think about how the morning's groceries would have to wait another day. The drive to school was quick, their old Honda protesting only slightly in the crisp morning air. Grace watched Lily skip up the steps, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. Other parents in newer cars gave Grace's weathered uniform a wide berth, but she held her head high. There was no shame in honest work. The diner was already bustling when Grace arrived for her shift. Martha, the morning cook, called out orders while Sophie, another waitress, juggled plates of steaming breakfast specials. "Table 6 needs more coffee," Sophie yelled as Grace tied her apron. "And 7 wants to know if we still have blueberry muffins." Grace fell into the familiar rhythm. Pour coffee, take orders, deliver plates, clear tables. The morning rush kept her moving, her feet already beginning to ache in her worn shoes. But every dollar in tips meant another meal, another bill paid, another small victory in keeping their little world turning. The bell above the door chimed around 10, when the breakfast crowd had thinned to just a few regulars nursing their coffee. Grace looked up, and her heart skipped. The man from last night stood in the doorway, looking uncertain, but somehow more put together than before. His long hair was tied back, with her ribbon, she noticed, and his face was freshly washed. He approached the counter slowly, holding something in his hand. As he got closer, Grace recognized the meal ticket she'd slipped into his takeout box the night before. It was one of her employee meal vouchers, worth little to most, but a free meal to someone in need. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice carrying an unexpected gentleness. I hope it's all right to use this?" He placed the ticket on the counter with careful movements, as if afraid of startling her. "Of course," Grace replied, already reaching for the coffee pot. "Would you like to start with some coffee? It's included." He nodded, and Grace noticed his eyes, a deep brown that held both weariness and warmth. "Thank you, Grace," he said, reading her name tag. "I'm Sam." The introduction surprised her. Most customers didn't bother learning her name, let alone offering theirs. She poured his coffee, noting how he wrapped his hands around the mug, as if savoring its warmth. The morning stretched into afternoon, and Sam stayed, nursing his coffee and eventually ordering a simple breakfast with the ticket. He was quiet but polite, thanking her each time she refilled his cup. Other customers gave him a wide berth, but he seemed used to it, keeping to himself in the corner booth. At 3:30, the bell chimed again, and Lily burst in, her face bright from the autumn air. "Mommy, Mrs. Johnson let me bring my art project home early." She waved a colorful paper in the air, then stopped short, noticing Sam in his booth. Before Grace could intervene, Lily marched right up to him, fearless in the way only children can be. "Hi, I'm Lily. Do you want to see my drawing? It's of our family's guardian angels." Sam looked startled, then a small smile softened his weathered features. "I'd be honored," he said, his voice gentle as he made space on the table for Lily's artwork. Grace watched, torn between maternal concern and something else, a warmth she couldn't quite name. Lily chattered away, pointing out details in her drawing, while Sam listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about her choice of colors and the stories behind each angel. "This one's my daddy," Lily explained, pointing to a figure with golden wings. "He's in heaven now, but Mom says he watches over us all the time." "I'm sure he does," Sam replied softly, and something in his tone made Grace's eyes sting. Lily studied Sam's face with that direct, innocent gaze children have. "You know what?" she said suddenly. "You feel safe, like Daddy used to." The words hung in the air like delicate crystal, and Grace felt her heart twist sharply in her chest. She saw Sam's eyes widen slightly, caught off guard by the simple truth in a child's observation. Martha called from the kitchen, breaking the moment. "Order up, Grace." Grace moved to get the waiting plates, her hands slightly unsteady. Behind her, she could still hear Lily's cheerful voice explaining the rest of her drawing to Sam, and his gentle responses. The scene felt both completely natural and utterly impossible, her daughter chatting easily with a stranger who, just yesterday, had been shivering on a curb. But Lily's words echoed in her mind. "You feel safe, like Daddy used to." Her daughter had always been perceptive, seeming to see straight through to people's hearts. It was a gift that sometimes frightened Grace with its accuracy. As she delivered plates to other tables, Grace kept glancing back at the unlikely pair, her bright-eyed daughter and the quiet man who had somehow earned Lily's instant trust. Sam handled the interaction with a grace that spoke of education and good breeding, despite his current circumstances. It made Grace wonder about his story, even as she reminded herself not to get too invested. They had enough challenges of their own, without taking on someone else's burdens. Yet watching them, seeing how carefully Sam treated each of Lily's words as precious things to be honored, Grace felt that twist in her heart again. It wasn't just pain this time, but something more complicated, a mixture of grief for what they'd lost, fear of what might come, and perhaps, despite her best efforts to guard against it, a tiny flicker of hope. Chapter 3. First Glimpse of Character. Chapter 2. A Stranger at the Diner. Scene 2. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the diner's parking lot as Grace wiped down her last table. Her feet ached from the 8-hour shift, and her lower back protested each time she bent over. Through the window, she spotted Sam sitting on the same bench he'd occupied all week, his posture straight despite his worn clothes. Over the past few days, he'd become a quiet fixture at the diner. He'd order a simple coffee with the meal tickets she kept slipping him, nursing it for hours while reading a tattered paperback. Unlike other homeless people she'd encountered, there was something different about him, a gentle refinement in his manners, a quiet intelligence in his eyes. "Mommy, can I have another cookie?" Lily called from her usual spot at the counter, homework spread around her like a paper fan. "You've already had 2, sweetie," Grace replied, gathering her cleaning supplies. "We need to get going anyway. We still have to stop at the grocery store." As Grace collected her things and helped Lily pack up her schoolwork, she noticed Sam standing up from his bench, brushing off his coat with careful movements. Their eyes met through the window, and he gave a slight, almost formal nod. "Ready to go, sweetie?" Grace asked, helping Lily into her purple jacket. "Can we say bye to Sam first?" Lily asked, already heading for the door. Grace hesitated. "Lily, wait." But her daughter was already pushing through the heavy glass door, her backpack bouncing with each step. "Hi, Sam," Lily chirped, showing none of the wariness Grace wished she'd display toward strangers. "Hello, Miss Lily," Sam replied, his voice carrying that same unexpected polish Grace had noticed before. He kept a respectful distance as Grace approached, hands in his pockets. "Mrs. Miller, I noticed you mentioned grocery shopping. I wondered if you might allow me to help carry your bags to your car." Grace's hand tightened on her purse strap. "That's very kind, but please, Mommy." Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Sam helped Mr. Peterson with his car yesterday when it wouldn't start. He's good at helping." Grace blinked, remembering the elderly regular who'd had battery trouble. She hadn't realized Sam had been the one to assist him. "I understand your hesitation," Sam said quietly. I'd like to repay some of your kindness, if you'll let me." There was something in his eyes, not desperation or cunning, but a simple desire to be useful. Grace found herself nodding slowly. "All right, thank you." The small grocery store was just around the corner. As they walked, Lily chattered about her day at school, directing her stories to both adults as if Sam had always been part of their routine. Grace noticed how he listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about Lily's science project. Inside the store, Grace carefully selected items from her strict budget list while Lily skipped ahead to the cereal aisle. Sam waited patiently by the cart, never presuming to follow too closely. "Lily, remember we're getting the store brand this time," Grace called out as her daughter reached for the more expensive cereals. "But Mom, the store brand is fine, sweetheart. We need to be careful with money this month." Sam shifted slightly, and Grace felt her cheeks warm. She hated admitting their financial struggles, especially in front of others. But Sam's face showed no judgment, only a quiet understanding that made her throat tight. At the checkout, Grace counted out exact change from her worn wallet while Sam waited near the door. The total was higher than she'd expected, and she had to put back the fresh fruit she'd hoped to get for Lily's lunches. "Ready?" she asked, gathering the bags. Before she could protest, Sam stepped forward and gently took the heavier ones, leaving her with just the lighter items. The walk to her old sedan was short, but Grace found herself relaxing slightly as Sam kept pace beside them, listening to Lily's continued stories about school. His presence felt steady, non-threatening. "The trunk sticks sometimes," Grace warned as she fumbled with her keys. "You have to lift slightly while turning the key?" Sam finished, demonstrating the motion perfectly. The trunk popped open smoothly. "How did you know that?" "Old Chevys often have that issue," he replied, carefully arranging the grocery bags. "It's usually the latch mechanism wearing down." Grace studied him as he worked, noting the careful way he made sure none of the bags would tip over during the drive. His hands were clean despite his rough appearance, his movements precise and almost elegant. "Thank you," she said softly as he closed the trunk. "You didn't have to do this." "Sometimes it's nice to be helpful," he replied, echoing her words to Lily about kindness from days before. Everyone needs a hand sometimes. Grace helped Lily into the back seat, her mind turning over this strange situation. Here was a homeless man who quoted classic literature, knew about car mechanics, and showed more genuine courtesy than most of her regular customers. "Bye, Sam," Lily called out, rolling down her window despite the autumn chill. "See you tomorrow?" Sam's weather-worn face softened into a gentle smile. "Perhaps, Miss Lily. Thank you both for letting me help." As Grace pulled out of the parking lot, she couldn't help glancing in her rearview mirror. Sam stood watching them leave, and Lily was twisted in her seat, waving enthusiastically. The sight stirred something in Grace's chest, a mixture of maternal concern and an unexpected warmth she wasn't quite ready to examine. "I like him, Mommy," Lily said, finally settling back in her seat. "He reminds me of how Daddy used to help people too." Grace swallowed hard, focusing on the road ahead. Her daughter's simple observation had hit close to home. There was something about Sam that didn't quite fit with his circumstances, something that both unsettled her and drew her in. But watching him interact with Lily today, seeing his gentle patience and quiet dignity, she realized she felt something she hadn't expected: trust. Chapter 4. The Dinner Table Talk. Chapter 3. First Glimpse of Character. Scene 2. Grace's small kitchen filled with the aroma of mac and cheese as she stirred the pot, her mind wandering back to Sam's gentle manner while helping with the groceries. The sound of Lily's sock-covered feet, padding across the linoleum floor, pulled her from her thoughts. "Mommy, why was Sam sitting outside today?" Lily asked, climbing onto one of the mismatched kitchen chairs. Her brown pigtails bounced as she settled in, hugging her knees to her chest. Grace carefully measured out 2 portions into worn ceramic bowls. "Sometimes people don't have homes to go to, sweetheart." "But why? Everyone needs a home." Lily's brow furrowed as she accepted her bowl, immediately stabbing at the pasta with her fork. Grace sat down across from her daughter, trying to find the right words. "Well, sometimes bad things happen to good people. They might lose their jobs or get sick or have other problems that make it hard to keep their homes." "Like when Daddy got sick?" Lily's voice grew quiet. Grace's heart clenched. "Yes, honey. Sometimes life gets very hard, even for people who try their best." "But Sam is so nice," Lily protested, dropping her fork with a clatter. "He helped you with the heavy bags, and he said please and thank you better than Jimmy at school. Why don't people want to help him?" Grace stirred her mac and cheese, buying time. "Sometimes people are scared of what they don't understand. They see someone who looks different or lives differently, and they forget to look at what's in that person's heart." "That's silly," Lily declared. "You can totally see Sam's good heart. It shows in his eyes when he smiles." Grace felt a mix of pride and worry bloom in her chest. Her daughter's compassion touched her deeply, but she also feared Lily's trusting nature could put her at risk. "You have a beautiful way of seeing people, sweetie. But we still need to be careful with people we don't know well." "But you helped him first," Lily pointed out, tilting her head. "You gave him food when he was hungry. Isn't that what Jesus says we should do?" Grace's cheeks warmed. Trust an 8-year-old to turn her own lessons back on her. "Yes, that's true, and it's good to help others when we can, but we also need to be smart about it." "Is that why you looked scared when he offered to help with the groceries?" "I wasn't scared," Grace protested automatically, then paused. "Well, maybe a little uncertain. It's my job to keep us safe." Lily nodded sagely. "But you didn't need to be scared. I could tell he was good." She took another big bite of pasta. "Do you think he has a family missing him somewhere?" The question hit Grace hard. She thought of Sam's dignified manner, the way he spoke with such careful courtesy. "I don't know, honey. Everyone has a story, but sometimes it's not our place to ask." "Maybe we could be his family," Lily suggested brightly. "Not like a real family, but you know, the kind that helps each other? Like how Mrs. Peterson brings us cookies sometimes, or how we help Mr. Roberts with his garden." Grace's throat tightened. "It's not that simple, sweetheart." "Why not?" Lily persisted. "He needs friends, and you said we should help people when we can." Grace got up to rinse her bowl, needing a moment. The evening light streaming through the kitchen window reminded her it was almost bedtime. "Let's get you ready for bed, okay? It's getting late." Later, after teeth were brushed and pajamas were on, Grace sat on the edge of Lily's small bed. The room was cozy with its faded floral wallpaper and stuffed animals standing guard. "Can we pray for Sam tonight?" Lily asked, clutching her favorite teddy bear. Grace smoothed Lily's hair back from her forehead. "Of course we can." "Dear God," Lily began, her young voice earnest, "please, help Sam find a home, and help other people see his good heart like we do, and maybe help him not be lonely anymore." Grace's eyes stung as she added her own silent prayer, not just for Sam's safety and well-being, but for guidance. She needed to know if her instinct to help was right, or if she was being foolishly naive. The weight of being both mother and father, of making all the decisions alone, pressed heavy on her shoulders. After kissing Lily goodnight, Grace walked to her own bedroom window. The autumn night was clear, stars twinkling above the small town's rooftops. Somewhere out there, Sam was probably looking at these same stars. The thought made her chest ache. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "Lord," she whispered, "give me wisdom. Show me how to be kind without being foolish, how to help without putting Lily at risk, and please, please, watch over Sam tonight." The stars offered no immediate answer, but Grace felt some of her anxiety ease. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with faith and careful compassion. Just as she had taught Lily, sometimes the bravest thing was simply to keep your heart open, even when the world told you to close it. Chapter 5. Town Whispers begin. Chapter 5. Small Town Talk. The morning sun streamed through the diner's front windows, catching dust motes in its golden rays. Grace tied her apron strings and smoothed down her uniform, ready to start another long day of serving coffee and collecting modest tips. The familiar smell of bacon and pancakes filled the air as she made her way to the coffee station. "Can you believe she's feeding that bum?" Martha's whispered voice carried from behind the counter. "I saw her give him a whole meal yesterday. I heard he's been hanging around after her shifts, too," Jenny added, her tone thick with disapproval. "Someone should tell her to be more careful. What kind of example is she setting for her daughter?" Grace's hands trembled slightly as she filled the coffee pot, but she kept her movements steady and her face neutral. The ache in her chest grew stronger with each word, but she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. The bell above the door chimed, and Sam walked in. His clothes were worn but clean, and he carried himself with that same quiet dignity she'd noticed before. Some customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others openly stared. A few even gathered their things and moved to tables further from the door. "Morning, Sam," Grace said warmly, ignoring the disapproving looks from Martha and Jenny. "Coffee?" "Yes, please." His voice was soft but clear. "And thank you, Grace." She poured him a cup, noting how clean his hands were despite his circumstances. He sat at the counter, keeping to himself and causing no trouble, yet the whispers continued. "There she goes again," Martha muttered to Jenny as they passed behind her. "Acting like he's a regular customer." "He is a regular customer," Grace said quietly but firmly. "And he deserves to be treated like one." The morning rush brought its usual chaos of orders and demands, but Grace noticed how other servers avoided Sam's section of the counter. She took care of his refills herself, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the growing tension in the air. Mrs. Henderson, one of the town's most prominent gossips, made a show of moving 3 tables away when Sam politely asked for more coffee. Her loud whispers carried clearly across the diner. "In my day, we knew better than to encourage their kind. What's Bill thinking, letting them in here?" Grace felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her head high. She'd learned long ago that dignity wasn't about what others thought of you. It was about how you carried yourself through difficult moments. When Lily arrived after school, her backpack bouncing against her small frame, she immediately brightened at the sight of Sam. "Hi, Mr. Sam," she called out cheerfully, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. "Hello, Lily," Sam replied, with a gentle smile that transformed his weathered face. "How was school today?" "We learned about butterflies," Lily exclaimed, climbing onto the stool next to him. "Did you know they start as caterpillars?" The simple exchange caused another wave of whispers to ripple through the diner. Grace saw Jenny shooting worried glances their way, while Martha disappeared into the kitchen, presumably to tell Bill about the situation. "Lily, honey," Grace said gently, "why don't you start on your homework? I've got another hour on my shift." "Can I sit here with Mr. Sam?" Lily asked innocently. "He helped me with my math yesterday, remember?" More disapproving murmurs. Grace noticed Mrs. Henderson pulling out her phone, no doubt to spread the latest gossip through her extensive network of church friends. "Your mother's right," Sam said kindly to Lily. "Homework comes first, perhaps another time." His consideration for their situation touched Grace deeply. He understood the delicate position they were in, even if Lily didn't. Lily moved to her usual booth, but kept waving at Sam every few minutes, her innocent joy a stark contrast to the adult's prejudices. As Grace's shift wound down, she noticed Sam carefully counting out exact change for his coffee and toast. He left it neatly stacked on the counter, along with a modest tip that spoke of his respect for her work. "Thank you for your kindness," he said quietly as he stood to leave. "Not many people look me in the eye anymore." "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity," Grace replied, meaning every word despite the day's difficulties. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of coffee refills and forced smiles. When it was finally time to leave, Grace helped Lily pack up her homework and put on her jacket. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, she noticed Mrs. Bradley, their next-door neighbor, standing across the street. The woman's arms were crossed, her expression clearly disapproving as she watched them exit the diner. Grace felt her stomach tighten, but she held her head high and took Lily's hand. They walked to their car, Grace's steps measured and deliberate, refusing to hurry despite the weight of Mrs. Bradley's judgment. She helped Lily into the back seat, double-checking her seatbelt as always. Chapter 6. A small act of kindness returned. Grace pushed through the diner's back door, balancing a stack of empty boxes for recycling. The familiar squeak that had annoyed customers for months was oddly absent. She paused, adjusting her grip on the cardboard, and noticed Sam kneeling by the door's hinges, a worn screwdriver in his weathered hands. "Oh!" Grace nearly dropped the boxes. "I didn't expect anyone to be here." Sam looked up, his eyes carrying that same gentle dignity she'd noticed before, despite his shabby appearance. "Door needed fixing," he said simply, pocketing the screwdriver. "Been bothering folks for a while now." Grace set the boxes down carefully. "You didn't have to do that. Just trying to be useful." He shrugged, his shoulders hunched slightly beneath his worn jacket. The autumn breeze ruffled his graying hair, and Grace noticed how his hands, though dirty, moved with surprising precision. "Where did you learn to fix things?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. A shadow crossed his face, here and there. He stood up slowly, testing the door. It swung silently on its hinges now, smooth as new. Sometimes the smallest repairs make the biggest difference. The back door opened again, and Lily burst through, her backpack bouncing. "Mom, I got my math test back and—" She stopped, her face lighting up. "Hi, Mr. Sam." Sam's entire demeanor softened at the sight of the little girl. "Hello, Lily. Did you fix the squeaky door?" Lily asked, reaching up to swing it back and forth. "It used to sound like an angry cat." Sam chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Sure did. Speaking of tests, how'd you do?" Lily's shoulders slumped. "Not so good. Miss Thompson says I need extra practice with fractions." Grace's heart ached. She'd tried helping Lily with her homework, but between her shifts and household chores, she barely had time to keep up with basic needs, let alone proper tutoring. "Fractions, huh?" Sam's eyes twinkled. "Those can be tricky. But you know what? They're everywhere in real life. Like right here at the diner." Lily's forehead wrinkled. "Really? Where?" "Tell you what," Sam said, glancing at Grace for permission. "If your mom doesn't mind, I could show you." Grace hesitated. The town's whispers had grown louder lately, and she knew letting Sam spend time with Lily would only fuel the gossip. But there was something in his eyes, a kindness, a wisdom that went beyond his appearance. "Please, Mom," Lily pleaded. "Mr. Sam explains things really well. He showed me how to tie my shoes better yesterday." Grace nodded slowly. "All right, but right here where I can see you, okay?" They settled at a corner booth, Sam pulling a clean napkin from the dispenser. Grace watched while serving other customers, stealing glances as Sam drew circles on the napkin. "See, if we think about a pie," Sam was saying, his voice patient and clear, "and we cut it into 4 equal pieces, each piece is 1/4 of the whole pie." Lily leaned forward, fascinated. "Like when Mom cuts the pies here at the diner." "Exactly," Sam smiled. "Now, if someone orders 2 pieces, what fraction of the pie would that be?" 2/4, Lily exclaimed, then furrowed her brow. "But wait, isn't that the same as 1/2? Now you're getting it. Sam's eyes crinkled with pride. That's what we call equivalent fractions. Grace watched as they worked through more examples, Sam using everything from coffee cups to sandwich portions to explain the concepts. His patience seemed endless, and Lily's giggles filled the diner as he made up silly fraction problems about squirrels sharing acorns and pirates dividing treasure. The afternoon light softened into evening, painting the diner's worn linoleum in warm amber tones. Other customers came and went, some casting curious glances at the unlikely pair in the corner booth. But Grace noticed something different in their expressions now. Less judgment, more intrigue. Martha, who had been one of the main gossips, paused while wiping down a nearby table. "Your little girl's really picking up those fractions quick," she commented quietly to Grace. "She is," Grace agreed, watching Lily throw her hands up in celebration after solving another problem. 3/6 is the same as 1/2, Lily announced proudly. "And 6/12 too." Sam high-fived her, his smile genuine and warm. "Perfect, you're a natural at this." Grace felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she hadn't expected. Here was a man society had written off as worthless, spending his afternoon teaching an 8-year-old girl about fractions with more patience than some paid tutors she'd met. His kindness wasn't showy or demanding recognition. It was as simple and genuine as fixing a squeaky door just because it needed doing. Lily's laughter rang out again as Sam drew a cartoon pizza with impossible toppings to create another math problem. The sound echoed through the diner, pure and joyful, and Grace felt hope stirring in her heart, not just for Lily's improving math skills, but for something larger she couldn't quite name. Looking at them now, Grace saw past Sam's worn clothes and weathered face to something that had been there all along. A gentle soul who found ways to give even when he seemed to have nothing left to give. The squeaky door and the math lesson were more than just kind gestures. They were glimpses of the man beneath the circumstances, whatever those circumstances might be. The evening sun cast long shadows across the booth where Lily and Sam sat, heads bent together over their napkin full of drawings and numbers, both smiling as if they'd discovered something precious. And maybe they had, Grace thought. Maybe they'd all discovered something about seeing past the surface to the heart of things, about the way hope could spring up in the most unexpected places, like fractions on a diner napkin and silent hinges on a back door. Chapter 7. A Night of Joy. Chapter 7. The Wooden Gift. Scene 1. The Saturday morning sun cast long shadows across the diner's parking lot as Grace wiped down tables before the breakfast rush. Lily sat at her usual corner booth, humming softly while coloring in her worn activity book. The bell above the door chimed, and Sam stepped inside, holding something behind his back. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying that quiet warmth Grace had come to recognize. Lily's head popped up from her coloring. "Sam!" She bounced in her seat, her pigtails swaying with emotion. Grace couldn't help but smile at her daughter's enthusiasm. "You're early today. Coffee won't be ready for another 15 minutes. Actually," Sam moved toward their booth, "I came to show Lily something." He brought his hands forward, revealing a small wooden figure. Lily's eyes widened. "What is it?" Sam placed the carving on the table. A delicate little horse, its mane flowing as if caught in mid-gallop. The wood had been sanded smooth, each detail carefully etched with obvious care. "I noticed you drawing horses the other day," Sam explained, his voice gentle. "Found some nice cedar scraps behind the hardware store. Thought you might like one of your own." Lily reached out, her small fingers tracing the wooden horse's curves with wonder. "You made this? For me?" Grace watched as Sam pulled up a chair, showing Lily how the horse could stand on its own. His hands, usually trembling slightly from the cold, moved with surprising steadiness as he demonstrated how he'd balance the figure. "See these little grooves here?" He pointed to the horse's hooves. "That's what keeps it standing straight. Took me a few tries to get it right." "It's beautiful," Grace said softly, noticing the intricate details, the carefully carved eyes, the flowing tail, even tiny marks suggesting a saddle. Lily clutched the horse to her chest. "Can I name her?" "Of course you can." Sam's eyes crinkled at the corners. "It's yours now. I'm going to call her Spirit," Lily declared, making the horse prance across the table. "Because she looks free, like she could run forever." Grace watched as Sam taught Lily about the different types of wood, explaining how cedar had a special smell and was naturally resistant to weather. His knowledge surprised her. It seemed there were layers to this quiet man that kept revealing themselves, like pages in a book slowly turning. "Where did you learn to carve like this?" Grace asked, sliding into the booth beside Lily. Sam's hands stilled for a moment. "My grandfather taught me, long time ago. Said it was important to be able to create something beautiful from what others throw away." He smiled at Spirit, prancing across the table under Lily's guidance. "Guess some lessons stick with you." The morning light streamed through the diner's windows, catching dust motes in its beams and making them dance like tiny stars. Grace noticed how Sam's shoulders seemed less hunched today, how his eyes held a spark of pride as Lily played with his creation. "Show me how you did it," Lily asked, setting Spirit carefully on the table. "Please?" Sam reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of wood and a pocket knife. "Well, first you have to see the horse inside the wood. It's already there, you just have to help it out." Grace watched them bend their heads together over the wood, Sam's patient voice explaining each step, Lily's face scrunched in concentration. The breakfast regulars began trickling in, but they seemed to understand something special was happening in that corner booth. They found their own seats quietly, sending curious but gentle glances toward the unlikely pair. As Sam demonstrated a simple cut, his knife carefully controlled, Grace felt something shift in her chest. Here was this man, whom others crossed the street to avoid, teaching her daughter with the gentleness of a father. The thought caught in her throat. "Look, Mommy." Lily held up a slightly lopsided attempt at a bird. "Sam showed me how to make the wings." "That's wonderful, sweetie." Grace blinked back unexpected tears. "You're a natural." The morning passed in a warm blur of coffee, refills, and quiet conversation. Sam showed Lily how to sand the rough edges of her carving, how to check for splinters, how to see the grain of the wood. His weathered hands moved with surprising grace, and Grace found herself pausing in her work just to watch them interact. When evening came, and they sat at their small kitchen table for dinner, Lily couldn't stop talking about her day. Spirit the horse had a place of honor next to her plate, and she kept reaching out to touch it between bites of mac and cheese. "This was the happiest day since Daddy went to heaven," Lily announced suddenly, her voice clear and certain in the way only children can be. Grace's fork clattered against her plate. The words hit her like a physical thing, sweet and painful all at once. She looked up to find Sam watching her, his eyes full of understanding and something else, something that made her heart ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. His smile was humble, almost shy, but it held such warmth that Grace had to look away, wiping quickly at her eyes. Lily reached across the table and took her mother's hand, while Spirit stood watch from her place of honor, her wooden mane forever caught in an eternal gallop toward tomorrow. Chapter 8. The Gossip Turns Cruel. End of Act 1. Chapter 8. Whispers and Warnings. Scene 1. The Monday morning breakfast crowd had thinned out when Bob, Grace's boss, caught her eye from across the diner. He stood in the doorway of his cramped office, his weathered face creased with concern. "Grace, got a minute?" Her stomach tightened as she set down her coffee pot. She'd worked at the Sunshine Diner long enough to recognize that tone. Straightening her apron, she followed him into the office, where the smell of old paperwork and coffee grounds hung heavy in the air. Bob settled into his squeaky chair, not meeting her eyes at first. Family photos crowded his desk. Soccer games, graduations, birthday parties. Grace had been there for most of them, serving cake at his youngest daughter's 16th birthday just last month. "Listen, Grace," he began, fidgeting with a pen. "You're one of my best waitresses. Been here what, 6 years now?" "7 this spring," she corrected softly. 7 years. He nodded, then sighed. "That's why this is hard. We've been getting complaints. About your friend." Grace's cheeks warmed. "Sam? The homeless fellow, yes." Bob leaned forward, his chair protesting. "Mrs. Henderson told me she won't bring her grandkids in anymore if he's around." The Wilsons canceled their regular Sunday breakfast reservation. "He's never caused any trouble," Grace protested. "He's polite, quiet." I know. Bob held up his hands. "But perception matters in a small town. People talk. And they're talking about how you let him hang around Lily." The mention of her daughter made Grace's spine stiffen. "I would never put Lily in danger." "Of course not. But others don't know him like you do. They see a stranger, a drifter." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Some folks are saying it's inappropriate. A single mother getting close to what?" Grace's voice came out sharper than intended. "Someone who needs kindness?" Bob's expression softened. "Grace, I'm not judging. Lord knows you've had it rough since Tom passed. But as your boss and your friend, I need to warn you. Be careful. This could affect more than just your job." Grace sat very still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Through the office window, she could see the regular customers chatting over coffee, their faces familiar from years of serving them. Now those same faces watched her differently, whispering behind menus when Sam came in. "I understand," she said finally, standing up. "Is that all?" Bob nodded, relief evident in his posture. "Thanks for hearing me out. Just think about what I said?" Grace left the office with her head high, but her hands trembled as she picked up the coffee pot. The morning dragged on, every glance from customers feeling like judgment. When her break came, she stepped outside for air, only to find Sam teaching Lily how to make paper airplanes on the curb. "Mommy, look!" Lily launched a perfectly folded plane that soared in a graceful arc. "Sam showed me how to make the wings just right." Sam looked up, his smile fading slightly as he noticed Grace's expression. "Everything okay?" Before she could answer, Mrs. Peterson walked past with her shopping bags. "Shameful," she muttered, loud enough to carry. "She's desperate taking up with a drifter." Grace's face burned. She felt the weight of eyes from the diner windows, imagined the conversations that would follow. For a moment, she wanted to run, to grab Lily and hide from all the whispers and judgments. But then she looked at Sam and Lily, their faces bright with simple joy. Her daughter's laughter rang pure and true, untouched by the town's prejudice. Sam's gentle patience as he showed Lily another fold spoke more truth than all the gossip combined. Grace straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Let them talk. Some things were worth standing tall for. The Middle, Chapter 9. Small Town Coldness. Chapter 9. Standing Strong, Scene 1. The autumn wind whipped through the school playground, scattering golden leaves across the asphalt as Grace waited among the other parents. Her worn denim jacket barely kept out the chill, but she hardly noticed the cold when she spotted Lily emerging from the building. Something was wrong. Her daughter's usual bouncy step was missing, her small shoulders hunched forward as she clutched her backpack tight against her chest. "Hey, sweetie," Grace called out, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "How was your day?" Lily didn't answer right away. She just grabbed Grace's hand and pulled her toward their old station wagon, away from the curious stares of other parents and children. Once inside the car, Lily's brave face crumpled. "They said mean things, Mommy," she whispered, tears welling in her big brown eyes. "About Sam." Grace's heart clenched. She turned in her seat to face her daughter, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from Lily's damp cheeks. "What did they say, baby?" Jenny and Madison called him a dirty hobo. Lily's voice trembled. "They said only weird people make friends with homeless people. They wouldn't let me play jump rope at recess because they said I might have germs from him." The words tumbled out in a rush, followed by a hiccuping sob. Grace took a deep breath, fighting back her own tears. She had expected the town's gossip to affect them, but seeing her daughter hurt made her anger flare. Still, she kept her voice gentle. "Come here, sweetheart." Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed over the center console into Grace's lap, something she hadn't done since she was much younger. Grace wrapped her arms around her daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and school chalk. "Remember when Daddy used to read us that story about the Good Samaritan?" Grace asked softly, running her fingers through Lily's hair. Lily nodded against her shoulder. "The one where everybody walked past the hurt man except for one person who helped?" That's right. And what did Jesus say about that story? He said we should love our neighbors like ourselves, Lily recited, her voice steadying slightly. Even if they're different from us. Exactly. Grace pulled back slightly to look into her daughter's eyes. Those kids at school, and even some grown-ups in town, they're like the people who walked past the hurt man. They're so busy judging that they forget what really matters. Being kind? Lily asked. Being kind, Grace confirmed. Sam is a good person who needed help, just like that man in the story. Remember how he fixed Mrs. Johnson's wobbly table at the diner? And how he helped you understand your multiplication tables? A small smile flickered across Lily's face. He made it fun with the paper airplanes. See? Those are the things that matter. Not what people say, not what someone looks like or where they sleep at night. What matters is what's in here. Grace tapped Lily's chest gently, right over her heart. But it still hurts when they're mean, Lily admitted quietly. I know it does, baby. Being kind isn't always easy. Sometimes it's the hardest thing in the world. Grace wiped away a fresh tear from Lily's cheek. But you know what? Every time you choose to be kind when others are cruel, you make the world a little bit better. You're so much stronger than those mean words. Neither of them had noticed Sam standing in the shadow of a nearby tree, where he often waited to walk them home. His worn coat and unkempt beard concealed the emotion playing across his face, but his hands were clenched tight in his pockets. Can we still help Sam, even if people make fun of us? Lily asked, her voice stronger now. Absolutely. In fact, it's even more important to help when others won't. Grace smiled, touching her forehead to her daughter's. You know what? I'm so proud of you for caring about Sam, even when it's hard. Lily sat up straighter, squaring her small shoulders. I'm proud of you too, Mommy. You're like the Good Samaritan. Grace laughed softly, touched by her daughter's words. Well, how about we show those kids at school what real friendship looks like? Maybe next time we see Sam, we can bring him one of your special drawings? Can I make him a whole book? Lily's eyes lit up with renewed enthusiasm. I can draw all the nice things he does, like fixing things and helping people. That's a wonderful idea, Grace said, her heart swelling with pride at her daughter's resilience. And maybe we can add some of your poems too? Yeah. Lily's entire demeanor had transformed, her earlier tears forgotten in the excitement of her new project. She scrambled back to her own seat, already pulling out her notebook. From his hidden spot, Sam watched as Grace started the car, catching glimpses of their faces through the windshield. He saw Lily's renewed smile, the determined set of Grace's jaw, and felt something twist inside his chest. These two precious souls were suffering because of his deception, facing judgment and cruelty because they had opened their hearts to him. As the station wagon pulled away from the curb, Sam's jaw set in a firm line. He had started this experiment to test people's character, but now he was witnessing true character in action, and it was humbling him beyond measure. Grace and Lily's unwavering kindness, their ability to stand strong in the face of judgment, their choice to see the best in him despite what others said, it was everything his wealth had never been able to buy. Watching their car disappear around the corner, Sam made a silent vow. He would never let their compassion become a source of pain. Whatever it took, he would find a way to protect them from the consequences of their own beautiful hearts. They had given him dignity when he appeared to have none. Now it was his turn to ensure they never lost theirs. The autumn wind rustled through the leaves again, carrying with it the sound of children's laughter from the playground. Sam remained in the shadows, his heart heavy with the weight of his promise, watching as the last few families departed from the school grounds. Chapter 10. Sam Gives Back. Chapter 9. Small-town coldness. Scene 2. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Sam walked through town, his weathered boots scuffing against the cracked sidewalk. Despite his worn clothes and unkempt appearance, his eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the storefronts and houses with quiet purpose. He paused near old Mrs. Henderson's white picket fence, noticing how several boards hung loose, threatening to topple in the next strong wind. Taking a deep breath, Sam approached the front door and knocked. Mrs. Henderson, a tiny woman with silver hair, peered out suspiciously through her screen door. "Ma'am," he said softly, removing his worn cap. "I noticed your fence needs fixing. I can help, if you'll let me." She hesitated, her wrinkled face pinched with uncertainty. "I don't have much money to spare." "No charge," Sam replied. "Just trying to keep busy." From across the street at the diner, Grace watched through the window while refilling coffee cups. Her heart swelled as Mrs. Henderson slowly opened her door, pointing toward her tool shed, while Sam listened attentively. Within an hour, the sound of hammering filled the air. Sam worked methodically, his movements precise and practiced as he straightened boards and replaced rusted nails. Neighbors walked by, some whispering behind their hands, others watching with reluctant curiosity. By lunchtime, the fence stood straight and proud. Mrs. Henderson brought out a glass of lemonade, her earlier wariness replaced by grateful smiles. "It hasn't looked this good in years," she admitted, pressing a few dollars into Sam's hand despite his protests. Word spread quickly in their small town. Mr. Peterson, who owned the hardware store, had a shed that needed painting. The Wilsons' garden gate wouldn't close properly. One by one, simple jobs appeared, and Sam tackled each with quiet determination. Grace watched it all from her spot behind the diner counter, pride warming her chest. Every time someone commented on Sam's workmanship, she wanted to say, "See, this is who he really is." But she kept quiet, letting his actions speak for themselves. That afternoon, as Grace's shift ended, her old Chevrolet made an ominous grinding noise when she turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. She tried again, her heart sinking. The car had been acting up for weeks, but she'd been hoping it would hold out until her next paycheck. "Need some help?" Sam's voice came from behind her. He'd finished painting the hardware store's shed and had grease stains on his hands from fixing the Wilsons' gate. Grace bit her lip, looking at Lily waiting patiently in the back seat. "It's been making strange noises lately," she admitted. "But I can't afford a mechanic right now." "Pop the hood," Sam said gently. "Let me take a look." Grace watched as he leaned over the engine, his movements confident and precise. His hands seemed to know exactly where to check, what to adjust. He worked quietly, stopping occasionally to explain things to Lily, who had scrambled out of the car to watch. "See this belt here?" he pointed, and Lily nodded eagerly. "It's like a rubber band that helps different parts of the engine work together. When it gets old, it can cause problems." "Like when my hairband gets too stretched out?" Lily asked, drawing a chuckle from Sam. "Exactly like that," he agreed, reaching for a wrench from the small collection of tools he'd gathered during his day's work. The autumn sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, by the time Sam straightened up. "Try it now," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Grace slid behind the wheel, her fingers crossed. She turned the key, and the engine roared to life, purring smoothly without a hint of its earlier protests. Lily clapped her hands in delight, bouncing on her toes. "You fixed it! You fixed it!" Grace stepped out of the car, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Sam, I can't thank you enough. At least let me pay you something for." He held up a hand, shaking his head. "No charge, remember? Just trying to keep busy." His eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, then softened as he added, "Besides, can't have you and Lily stranded somewhere." The moment was interrupted by Mr. Peterson leaving the hardware store. He paused, looking at Sam with new consideration. "Good job on that shed today," he said gruffly. "If you're looking for more work, I might have some other projects." Sam nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir. I'd appreciate that." As Mr. Peterson walked away, Grace noticed other townspeople watching from nearby storefronts and sidewalks. Their expressions were changing, ever so slightly, from suspicion to curiosity, from judgment to grudging respect. Lily tugged at Sam's sleeve. "Can you teach me how to fix things too?" "Lily!" Grace started to protest, but Sam's gentle laugh stopped her. "Tell you what," he said, crouching down to Lily's level. "Next time I'm working on something simple, you can be my assistant. But only if your mom says it's okay." Chapter 11. A Magical Day Out. Chapter 10. Sam Gives Back, Scene 2. The autumn fair filled the town square with vibrant colors and joyful sounds. Delicious aromas of caramel apples, roasted nuts, and cotton candy drifted through the crisp October air. Grace hesitated at first when Sam invited them after church, but Lily's excited bouncing made it impossible to say no. Sam looked different today. His usual worn jacket was clean, and he'd trimmed his beard. He'd even managed to smooth down his unruly hair. Grace noticed these small changes with a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. "Look, Mommy," Lily pointed at the twirling carousel, its painted horses gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Can we ride it, please?" Before Grace could explain about their tight budget, Sam pulled out a small handful of crumpled bills from his pocket. "This is from fixing Mrs. Henderson's fence," he said quietly. "Please, let me do this for Lily." Grace started to protest, but Sam's eyes held such genuine hope that she found herself nodding. Lily squealed with delight, grabbing both their hands and pulling them toward the ticket booth. "3 tickets, please," Sam said to the vendor, carefully counting out the money. As they walked toward the carousel, Grace noticed some townspeople staring and whispering. Mrs. Patterson, who always ordered the same breakfast at the diner, quickly steered her grandchildren away. But today, Grace lifted her chin and kept walking. Sam's quiet dignity beside her made their judgment seem small and mean. The carousel music tinkled cheerfully as they climbed aboard. Lily chose a magnificent white horse with a flowing golden mane, while Grace and Sam took seats on the bench behind her. As the ride began to spin, Lily's laughter rang out pure and clear above the mechanical organ music. "She hasn't laughed like that in so long," Grace whispered, more to herself than to Sam. Sam's voice was gentle. "You're doing an amazing job with her, Grace. Anyone can see how special she is." After the carousel, they wandered through the fair games. Sam proved surprisingly good at the ring toss, winning Lily a small stuffed penguin she immediately named Mr. Waddles. At the balloon dart game, he helped Lily aim carefully, his large hands steady on her small shoulders as she threw. "You're really good with her," Grace said as they watched Lily skip ahead to look at a display of painted pumpkins. Sam ducked his head, suddenly shy. "She makes it easy. She sees people for who they are, not what they look like or what they own." They stopped at the cotton candy stand, where Sam bought a huge pink cloud on a paper cone. Lily's eyes grew wide as he handed it to her. "Remember to share with your mom," he said with a wink. They found a quiet spot near the duck pond to sit and watch the sunset. The cotton candy melted on their tongues as golden light painted the autumn trees in brilliant oranges and reds. Lily sat between them, happily sticky with sugar, clutching Mr. Waddles. A peaceful silence fell over their little group. Grace felt something shift inside her, like a door slowly opening to let in warmth and light. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so content. "Sam?" Lily's voice was soft and serious. "Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for today." She turned and wrapped her arms around his middle, pressing her face against his worn jacket. "This is the happiest day since Daddy went to heaven." Grace's breath caught in her throat as she watched Sam gently return Lily's hug, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that moment, she felt her heart truly open for the first time since losing her husband, like a flower finally turning toward the sun. Chapter 12. The Revelation. Chapter 12. The Truth Revealed. Scene 1. Grace wiped down the last table of her morning shift, her mind still warm with memories of yesterday's fare. The bell above the diner's door chimed, but she didn't look up immediately, focused on a stubborn coffee stain. "Excuse me, Miss Miller." The deep, familiar voice made her pause. Something about it was different, more polished, more confident. Grace straightened up and turned around. Her cleaning rag dropped to the floor. A sleek black Mercedes waited outside the diner's window, its pristine surface gleaming in the autumn sunlight. But that wasn't what made her breath catch. Standing before her was Sam, but not the Sam she knew. Gone was the worn jacket and scruffy beard. Instead, he wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His face was clean-shaven, revealing strong features she'd only glimpsed before. "Sam?" Her voice came out as a whisper. He shifted uncomfortably, his fingers adjusting his silk tie. "I need to speak with you, Grace. Please." The diner had emptied out after the breakfast rush. Only old Mr. Peterson sat in his usual corner, absorbed in his crossword puzzle. Grace's coworker Jenny stood frozen behind the counter, coffee pot suspended in mid-pour. "I don't understand," Grace said, taking a step back. "What is this?" Sam, or whoever he was, gestured toward the door. "Would you join me in the car? I owe you an explanation." Grace's mind raced. The Sam she knew slept on park benches and helped fix her rusty old Chevrolet. This man looked like he stepped out of a business magazine, but his eyes, those were the same kind eyes that had shown such gentleness to Lily. With trembling hands, Grace untied her apron. "Jenny, can you cover for me?" Jenny nodded mutely, still staring. The car's interior smelled of rich leather. Grace perched on the edge of the seat, her diner uniform feeling suddenly shabby. Sam sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "My name is Samuel Harrington," he began quietly. "I'm the CEO of Harrington Enterprises and founder of the Harrington Foundation for Social Change." Grace's head spun. Harrington, even she knew that name. It appeared on buildings downtown, in newspaper headlines. "For the past 3 months, I've been living undercover in different communities," he continued, "testing people's reactions to those they consider beneath them, studying genuine compassion versus performative charity." Each word felt like a physical blow. Grace wrapped her arms around herself, remembering every kind word, every shared meal, every moment she'd trusted him with Lily. "So we were just an experiment?" Her voice cracked. "All those times you played with Lily, fixed my car, was that just research?" Sam leaned forward, his expression pained. "No, Grace. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You and Lily, you changed everything. Your kindness wasn't just data for a study." It touched my heart in ways I never expected. But Grace barely heard him. Her mind flashed to Lily's delighted face at the fair yesterday, to her daughter's innocent trust in this man who'd been living a lie. "You let my 8-year-old child love you," she said, her voice turning cold. "You knew how much she missed her father, and you played with her feelings. Grace, please. All this time you could have helped us, really helped us. Instead, you watched me count pennies for groceries, watched people gossip and judge." Angry tears spilled down her cheeks. "Was it entertaining, Mr. Harrington? Did we make a good case study in poverty and desperation?" Sam reached for her hand, but Grace yanked it away. "My kindness wasn't a test to pass, Sam. It wasn't a game. It was real." "I know that now," he said softly. "That's why I had to tell you the truth. Because what you and Lily gave me, genuine compassion, friendship without agenda, it's worth more than any fortune I have." Grace stared out the window at the familiar diner where she worked so hard for so little. The morning sun caught the threads of her worn uniform, the same one she'd worn when she first offered a homeless man a warm meal. "I trusted you," she whispered. The words hung heavy in the leather-scented air. "Lily trusted you." Sam's face crumpled with genuine remorse. Grace. But she was already reaching for the door handle. Her fingers trembled as she pushed it open, the cool autumn air rushing in. "Please," Sam called after her. "Let me make this right." Grace paused, one foot on the curb. Without turning around, she said quietly, "I helped you because I saw a person in need, not because of what you had. But now, everyone will think the worst of me." She stepped out of the car, her waitress shoes crunching on fallen leaves. The diner's bell chimed as she pushed through the door, leaving behind both the luxurious car and the man she thought she'd known. Inside, Jenny and Mr. Peterson stared at her with open curiosity. Soon, the whole town would know. The homeless man Grace Miller had befriended wasn't homeless at all. He was a billionaire playing games with people's lives. Grace grabbed her cleaning rag from the floor, her vision blurring with tears. She'd thought she was helping someone rebuild their dignity. Instead, she'd been the one stripped of hers. Chapter 13. Humiliation in Public. Chapter 12. The Revelation. Scene 2. Word traveled like wildfire through their small town. Grace stood in the cereal aisle of Walker's Grocery, her shopping basket heavy with the week's basics. Store-brand pasta, canned soup, and the fruit snacks Lily loved. The whispers reached her ears before she saw anyone. "Can you believe it? That waitress from Joe's diner was getting cozy with a billionaire. I heard he was pretending to be homeless this whole time. Grace's cheeks burned as she gripped the shopping basket tighter. She kept her eyes fixed on the prices, trying to ignore the stares boring into her back. Mrs. Peterson, who usually chatted with her about church bake sales, hurried past without a word. Guess she knew what she was doing all along, someone muttered loud enough for Grace to hear. Playing the sweet, helpful widow while fishing for a rich man. The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, the aisle too narrow. Grace abandoned her half-filled basket by the shelf and walked quickly toward the exit, her arms wrapped around herself as if they could shield her from the judgment. Outside, the autumn wind whipped her hair around her face. She rushed to her car, the one Sam had fixed just days ago, and sat behind the wheel, hands trembling. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Sam. She ignored it, just like the previous dozen. The drive to Lily's school felt endless. Parents gathered at the pickup line turned to stare as she walked past. These were the same people who'd smiled at her yesterday, who'd shared PTA meetings and birthday parties with her for years. "Mommy," Lily's voice cut through the tension as she ran from the school doors. But Grace noticed how some of the other kids pulled away when Lily passed, how their parents tugged them closer. "Hey, sweetie." Grace managed a smile, kneeling to hug her daughter. "How was your day?" Lily's usual bounce was missing as they walked to the car. "Jenny wouldn't sit with me at lunch today. She said her mom told her to stay away from me." Grace's heart clenched. "Oh, honey." "And Ms. Roberts asked me if it was true that our friend Sam was actually a rich man in disguise." Lily's lower lip trembled. "Why would Sam pretend to be poor? Was he tricking us?" Grace helped Lily into the car, buying time to find the right words. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? The betrayal felt raw, like a fresh cut. They drove in silence until Lily spoke again. "Tommy said you only helped Sam because you wanted his money. But that's not true, right?" "We didn't know he had money." Grace pulled over, unable to drive through the tears blurring her vision. She turned to face her daughter. "No, sweetie. We helped Sam because it was the right thing to do, because everyone deserves kindness." Her phone buzzed again. Sam's name flashed on the screen, along with a text. "Please let me explain. What you saw in me, the real me, wasn't a lie." Grace switched off the phone, but Lily had seen it. "Why won't you talk to him, Mommy?" "Because." Grace struggled to find words an 8-year-old would understand. "Sometimes when people lie to us, it hurts very much, even if they had reasons. But Sam taught me math," Lily said quietly. "And he fixed our car, and he made me laugh when I was sad about Daddy." Her small hand reached for Grace's. "He was still kind when he was just Sam." Grace looked at her daughter, struck by the simple wisdom in those words. Yes, Sam had lied about who he was. But the man who'd fixed their car with gentle hands, who'd helped carry groceries without being asked, who'd made Lily smile again, that hadn't been a lie. Her phone lay silent now in her lap. Outside, familiar faces walked past their parked car, some pointing, others whispering behind raised hands. The town that had been their home for years suddenly felt foreign and cold. "Jenny's mom says we should stay away from Sam now," Lily continued, her voice small. "But I don't want to. He's our friend." Grace felt tears slide down her cheeks. The betrayal still stung, but Lily's words echoed in her mind. He was still kind when he was just Sam. The man who'd sat in their diner with quiet dignity, who'd treated them with respect when others turned away, that man had been real, hadn't he? Her phone buzzed one final time. Grace glanced at the message. "I never meant to hurt you or Lily. The kindness you showed me changed my life. Please give me a chance to explain." But Grace couldn't. Not yet. The pain was too fresh, the humiliation too raw. She started the car again, watching more townspeople stop and stare. "Let's go home, sweetie," she said softly. As they drove through familiar streets that now felt like a gauntlet of judgment, Lily held her hand. "But he was still kind when he was Sam," she whispered again, as if those words could heal everything. Grace squeezed her daughter's hand, unable to answer. The autumn wind rattled leaves against their windshield as they headed home, leaving behind the whispers but carrying the weight of betrayal with them. Chapter 14. The Downfall. Chapter 13. Humiliation in Public. Scene 2. The morning sun cast long shadows through the diner's windows as Grace tied her apron with trembling fingers. She'd barely slept after yesterday's revelation about Sam's true identity, and now every customer's glance felt like an accusation. "Grace, could you come to my office?" Joe, the diner's owner, called from the back. His usually warm voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. The short walk to his cramped office felt like miles. Photos of Joe's family lined the walls, 20 years of memories in this place she'd called her second home. He sat behind his desk, shoulders hunched, not meeting her eyes. "Have a seat, Grace." She sank into the worn chair, her throat tight. The coffee maker gurgled in the kitchen, a sound that had always been comforting before. Now it just reminded her of Sam sitting at the counter, his quiet dignity masking a secret that had shattered her world. "Grace, you've been with us for what, 6 years now?" Joe rubbed his balding head. "You're one of our best waitresses, never had a complaint until Sam," Grace finished quietly. "Look, I've got customers threatening to boycott. Mrs. Henderson. You know she brings her whole church group every Sunday. She says she won't come back if—" He trailed off, shuffling papers on his desk. "The thing is, Grace, this is a small town. People talk, and right now they're talking about you and that billionaire who was pretending to be homeless." Grace's hands twisted in her lap. "I didn't know who he was, Joe. I was just trying to help someone in need." "I believe you." Joe's voice softened. "But it doesn't matter what I believe. Business is down 30% since yesterday, people are saying." He cleared his throat. "Well, you've probably heard what they're saying. That I was trying to trap a rich man?" The words tasted bitter. "That I somehow knew who he really was? I'm sorry, Grace. I really am, but I have to let you go." The words hit her like a physical blow. She thought of Lily's school fees, the heating bill that was already overdue, the ancient car that needed repairs. "Please, Joe, I need this job. Lily needs—" "I know." Joe pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. "Here's your final check, plus 2 weeks severance. It's the best I can do." Grace took the envelope with numb fingers. Her vision blurred as she untied her apron and laid it on his desk. The familiar fabric, worn soft from countless washings, represented more than just a job. It was security, dignity, independence. "Take care of yourself, Grace," Joe said as she stood. "And Lily, too." She walked through the kitchen one last time, past Maria at the grill, who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the new waitress, already wearing what had been Grace's section. Outside, the autumn wind had turned bitter, matching the hollow feeling in her chest. The walk home seemed endless. Each familiar storefront held memories now tainted. The hardware store where Sam had bought supplies to fix her car. The park bench where he'd helped Lily with her homework. Her daughter's innocent trust in him had warmed Grace's heart then. Now it felt like another betrayal. When she reached their small house, the afternoon light was fading. She had 2 hours before she needed to pick up Lily from school. 2 hours to figure out how to tell her 8-year-old daughter that their world was falling apart again. Grace sat at the kitchen table staring at the final paycheck. The amount wouldn't cover next month's rent. She thought of Sam, no, Samuel Harrington, and his billions, his deception, his games with people's lives. Anger warmed her chest, pushing back the cold fear of uncertainty. The walk to Lily's school was usually a peaceful time, but today Grace's steps were heavy. As she approached the playground, she heard raised voices. Her heart clenched when she recognized Lily's voice among them. "My mom is not like that." Lily's voice cracked with tears. Grace rounded the corner to find her daughter facing 3 older girls. Lily's backpack lay in the dirt, its contents scattered. "Your mom's a gold digger," one of the girls taunted. "My mom says she was just pretending to be nice to that homeless man because she knew he was really rich." "That's enough." Grace's voice cut through the playground noise. The girls scattered at the sight of an adult, but the damage was done. Lily ran to her. burying her face in Grace's coat. Together, they gathered the scattered school supplies, neither speaking until they were home. That night, after a quiet dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches, Lily's comfort food, Grace sat on her daughter's bed, running her fingers through Lily's hair. The room was dark, except for the glow of the nightlight, casting star patterns on the ceiling. "Why are people being so mean, Mommy?" Lily's voice was small, muffled against her pillow. "Sam was nice to us. He fixed your car, and helped me with math, and made me that wooden horse." "I know, sweetheart." Grace's heart ached at the confusion in her daughter's voice. "Jenny's mom told her not to play with me anymore." Lily's shoulders began to shake. She said we were just trying to get Sam's money." The sobs came then, deep and heartbreaking. Grace gathered Lily into her arms, rocking her like she used to when she was smaller. Her own tears fell silently into her daughter's hair. "Your mom's a gold digger." The cruel words echoed in the darkness. Grace held Lily tighter, her voice fierce and tender. "We'll be okay, sweetheart. We'll be okay." Chapter 15. Sam's Regret. Chapter 14. The Downfall. Scene 2. The late afternoon rain drummed against Grace's windows as she moved listlessly around her small kitchen, trying to keep her hands busy. Lily sat at the kitchen table, pushing corn kernels around her plate with her fork, her usual chatter silenced by the weight of the day's events. A knock at the door made them both freeze. "Grace?" Sam's voice carried through the thin wood. "Please, I need to explain." Lily's head snapped up, hope flickering across her face. "Mommy, it's Sam." "Stay at the table, sweetheart," Grace said quietly but firmly. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she approached the door, keeping the chain lock fastened. Through the narrow gap she could see Sam, no longer in the worn clothes she'd grown familiar with, but in an expensive coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was neatly trimmed, his face cleanly shaved. He looked like a stranger. "Grace, please," he said, his eyes pleading. "Let me make this right." "Make it right?" Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I lost my job today." Lily came home crying because kids at school called her mother a gold digger. Sam's face crumpled. "I never meant for any of this to happen. The project, it was supposed to be about finding genuine kindness in people. You showed me more compassion than anyone ever has." "Stop." Grace's fingers gripped the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. "I helped you because I saw a man in need, not because of money. I trusted you." "Lily trusted you. Do you know what it took for me to let anyone near her after her father died? And now," she swallowed hard, "now you've ruined us." "I can fix this," Sam insisted, reaching for his wallet. "I can make sure you never have to worry about money again. I can—" "No." The word came out sharp as glass. "That's exactly what everyone thinks I wanted all along. Your money, your help." She blinked back angry tears. "But all I wanted was to show kindness to someone who seemed to need it, to teach my daughter that everyone deserves dignity and respect." Behind her, she heard Lily's small footsteps approaching. "Mommy? Stay back, honey," Grace called over her shoulder, never taking her eyes off Sam. "I was wrong," Sam said softly. "I thought I was doing something noble, testing people's true nature. But you taught me more about genuine compassion in a few weeks than I've learned in all my years of philanthropy." "Compassion isn't a test, Mr. Harrington," Grace said, using his real name for the first time. The formal address made him flinch. "It's not a project or an experiment. It's seeing someone hurting and choosing to help, even when it costs you something." The rain had begun to soak through Sam's expensive coat, but he didn't seem to notice. "Let me at least explain to the town, make them understand." "Understand what?" Grace's voice trembled. "That you played with people's lives? That you made a game out of our kindness?" She shook her head. "Please, just go." "Grace, go." The word came out as half sob. "We trusted you. We let you into our lives. And you were lying the whole time." Sam stood there, rainwater running down his face. In that moment, despite his fine clothes and wealthy bearing, he looked more lost than he ever had in his homeless disguise. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never meant to hurt you. Either of you." Grace couldn't bear to look at him anymore. She closed the door softly but firmly, sliding the deadbolt into place. "Mommy?" Lily's voice was small behind her. "Why can't we forgive Sam?" Grace turned and gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her close as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "Sometimes, sweetheart, trust is like a beautiful glass vase. Once it's broken, all the money in the world can't put it back together exactly the same way." Through the window, she watched Sam's figure retreat into the rain, his shoulders bent as if carrying an invisible weight. For a moment, she remembered the quiet dignity he'd shown while helping her carry groceries, the gentle way he'd explained math problems to Lily, the shy smile when he'd fixed her car. But that man had been a lie, a carefully crafted character, in an experiment she never agreed to be part of. The rain continued to fall as Sam disappeared into the gathering dusk, taking with him the fragile trust they'd built and leaving behind only broken pieces of what might have been. Chapter 16, Darkest Night. Chapter 15, Sam's Regret, Scene 2. Grace's hands trembled as she lifted her grandmother's silver locket from its velvet box. The precious heirloom caught the weak afternoon light, its worn surface still beautiful after decades of careful keeping. Inside, two tiny photographs faced each other, her grandmother as a young woman on one side and baby Grace on the other. She blinked back tears, remembering how her grandmother had pressed it into her hands on her deathbed. "For times when you need courage, dear heart," she had whispered. Now, sitting at her kitchen table with an overdue heating bill spread before her, Grace needed that courage more than ever. Lily's cough from the next room made her stomach clench. The house had grown so cold these past few days that they'd taken to wearing extra sweaters indoors. With no job and winter closing in, Grace had run out of options. The pawnshop bell jangled as she pushed open the heavy door. Mr. Peterson, the owner, looked up from his newspaper. His eyes softened when he recognized her. He'd known her family for years. "Grace Miller," he said quietly. "What brings you in today?" She placed the locket on the glass counter, her fingers lingering on its familiar surface. "How much?" Her voice cracked slightly. Mr. Peterson picked up the locket, examining it with gentle hands. "Your grandmother's, isn't it? I remember her wearing this to church every Sunday." Grace nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I can give you 200, he said finally, his voice kind. "That's more than its market value, but—" He trailed off, understanding in his eyes. It was enough to cover the heating bill with a little left over for groceries. Grace swallowed hard and nodded again. As Mr. Peterson counted out the bills, she could feel her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "For times when you need courage." But what about when courage wasn't enough? The walk home felt longer than usual. The autumn wind cut through her thin jacket and dead leaves skittered across her path. She clutched the envelope of cash, thinking of all the times she'd touched that locket for strength when her husband died, when Lily was sick, during countless lonely nights. Inside her empty house, Grace moved mechanically through the rooms. She paid the heating bill online, made soup for dinner, helped Lily with homework. But every few minutes, her hand would drift to her throat where the locket used to rest, finding only bare skin. "Mommy?" Lily looked up from her math worksheet. "Are you sad?" Grace forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetheart." "Is it because of Sam?" Lily's innocent question hit like a physical blow. "No, baby." Grace smoothed her daughter's hair. "Sometimes grown-ups just have hard days." After tucking Lily into bed with an extra blanket, Grace sat alone in the darkness of her kitchen. The house felt hollow, stripped of warmth despite the heating now working again. She'd lost more than just her grandmother's locket today. She'd lost another piece of her dignity. The silence pressed in around her until she couldn't bear it anymore. Grace slid from her chair onto her knees, clasping her hands on the worn linoleum floor. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet kitchen. "I don't understand why this is happening. I tried to do the right thing, to be kind, to teach Lily good values." Her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. "But I'm so tired, so scared." Tears fell onto her clasped hands as she continued praying. I need strength. Not for me, but for Lily. She deserves better than this. Please, Lord, give me strength to keep going for Lily. The kitchen remained silent, except for the soft sound of her crying. But as she knelt there, something settled in her heart. Not peace exactly, but determination. She would find a way forward. She had to. For Lily. The end. Chapter 17. Sam's Decision. Chapter 17. The Path to Redemption, Scene 1. Sam sat alone in his corner office, staring out at the city lights twinkling below. The plush leather chair and mahogany desk felt cold and empty now. His fingers drummed restlessly against a stack of financial reports he couldn't focus on. All he could see was Grace's face, hurt, betrayed, dignified, even in her pain. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room. His secretary Patricia knocked softly before entering with a fresh cup of coffee. She'd worked for him for 15 years and had never seen him like this, disheveled, distracted, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled from hours of worried pacing. "Sir, the board meeting is in 30 minutes, she reminded him gently. Sam barely heard her. His mind was replaying that moment outside Grace's door, her words cutting through him like ice. I helped you because you were a man in need, not because of money. Now you've ruined us. Cancel it, he said suddenly, standing up. Cancel everything for the next few days. Patricia blinked in surprise, but nodded. She'd learned long ago to trust his instincts, even when they seemed unusual. And get me Mayor Thompson on the phone, he added, his voice growing stronger with purpose. Tell him it's about organizing a town gathering. Something big. As Patricia hurried out, Sam pulled out a fresh legal pad. His hand, usually so steady signing million-dollar contracts, shook slightly as he began to write. This wasn't about money or reputation anymore. This was about making things right. He thought about how Grace had served him coffee with dignity when others sneered, how she'd taught Lily to see past appearances to the heart of a person, how she'd given from her own need, never expecting anything in return. The phone rang, Mayor Thompson calling back. Sam took a deep breath and picked up the receiver. John? Yes, I need a favor. A big one. I want to rent the town square for this Saturday. Yes, the whole square. He paused, listening. Because I need to right a wrong. Over the next hours, Sam threw himself into planning with the same intensity he usually reserved for corporate takeovers. He called in favors, arranged for chairs and a podium, ordered catering from local businesses, making sure to include Grace's former diner, a pointed message to its owner. By midnight, his office was littered with coffee cups and crumpled papers. On his computer screen, local news websites showed the announcement, Town Square Gathering, this Saturday, special address, by Samuel Harrington. But the real work was spread out before him on his desk, draft after draft of his speech. He'd never struggled so much with words before. How could he explain to an entire town that their cruelest gossip had been aimed at their finest heart? He picked up his pen again, starting fresh. I came to this town in disguise, thinking I could test people's character. Instead, I learned what true character is from a woman who had every reason to turn away, but chose kindness instead. No, that wasn't right. He crumpled the paper and tried again. Grace Miller taught me more about wealth in a few weeks than I learned in 20 years of making millions. Better, but still not enough. The words needed to be perfect. They needed to restore her dignity, to make the town see what he had seen, the quiet strength, the genuine compassion, the unwavering faith that guided her actions. Sam glanced at his watch, 2 a.m. His back ached from hours of hunching over the desk, but he couldn't stop. Not yet. He picked up his pen one more time and wrote at the top of a clean page, Grace Miller, a lesson in true wealth. The words flowed easier now as he thought about her genuine smile when serving coffee, her gentle way of correcting Lily's math homework, her fierce protection of her daughter's innocence, while teaching her to be kind to those in need. Each memory added depth to his understanding of what he needed to say. He wrote about small moments, Grace slipping extra bread to elderly customers who couldn't afford full meals, her quiet prayers before each shift, the way she defended him against whispers even when it cost her dearly. He detailed how she'd offered friendship without agenda, help without expectation, and dignity without condition. The sky outside his window began to lighten, painting the city in soft pre-dawn colors. Sam's hand cramped from writing, but he barely noticed. The speech was taking shape, becoming something that might begin to make amends. Patricia found him there when she arrived at 7, still in yesterday's suit, surrounded by drafts but with clear purpose in his eyes. On his desk lay the final version of his speech, Grace's name written at the top in careful letters, each word below chosen to honor the woman who had taught him the true meaning of wealth. "Should I send out the press releases?" Patricia asked softly. Sam nodded, his eyes fixed on Grace's name. "Yes," he said. "It's time to make things right." Chapter 18. The Invitation. Chapter 17. Sam's Decision, Scene 2. The morning sun filtered through Grace's kitchen window, casting warm squares of light across the worn linoleum floor. She stood at the counter, methodically sorting through bills and junk mail with trembling hands. Her fingers paused on a cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive feeling, with her name written in elegant script. Grace's heart clenched. She knew that handwriting now, had seen it on the card Sam had left with his desperate apologies. Without opening it, she could feel the weight of his words inside, pressing against the paper like a tangible thing. "What's that, Mommy?" Lily asked, looking up from her breakfast cereal. Milk dripped from her spoon as she pointed at the envelope. "Nothing important, sweetie," Grace said, moving to drop it in the trash. But Lily was faster, small hands darting out to snatch the envelope. "It's pretty!" Lily exclaimed, running her fingers over the raised lettering. "Like a princess invitation!" Grace reached for it, but Lily had already torn it open, her eyes growing wide as she read the formal invitation inside. "It's for a special town meeting at the community center, this Saturday?" Her face lit up with excitement. "Can we go, Mommy? Please?" "Lily, honey." Grace sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted. The past week had been a blur of job applications and rejected calls, of counting pennies, and trying to hold her head high when she walked through town. "I don't think that's a good idea." "But why not?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "Maybe Sam will be there. I miss him." Grace's chest ached at the innocent hope in her daughter's voice. "Sam? Mr. Harrington? He's not who we thought he was, sweetheart." "Yes, he is," Lily insisted, climbing into Grace's lap. Though she was getting almost too big for this, Grace welcomed the warm weight of her. "He helped me with math. He fixed our car. He made me laugh when I was sad about Daddy." Her small hands framed Grace's face. "He was nice before we knew he was rich, and he's still nice now." Grace closed her eyes against the sting of tears. "It's not that simple, baby." "Why not?" Lily's question hung in the air, full of that straightforward wisdom that children sometimes possessed. "You always say we should forgive people when they're sorry. Is Sam sorry?" Grace thought of the dozens of messages he'd left, each one more humble and desperate than the last. The boxes of groceries that had appeared on their porch, which she'd donated to the food bank. The envelope of cash she'd returned unopened. "I think he is," she admitted softly. "Then we should go." Lily bounced in her lap, hope restored. "Please, Mommy? Just this once?" Grace looked down at the invitation again. The words swam before her eyes. A special town gathering to honor community spirit. Her first instinct was still to refuse, to protect herself and Lily from more gossip and judgment. But maybe Lily was right. Maybe sometimes the simple answer was the brave one. "What if people say mean things again?" Grace asked, voicing her deepest fear. Lily wrapped her arms around Grace's neck, squeezing tight. "Then I'll hold your hand really tight, like you do for me when I'm scared. And we'll be brave together." Grace's throat tightened with emotion. When had her little girl grown so wise? She pressed a kiss to Lily's forehead, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. The invitation sat between them on the table, no longer threatening but simply waiting for an answer. "Okay," Grace whispered, feeling something shift in her heart. "Just this once." Lily squealed with delight, hugging Grace even tighter. "Can I wear my blue dress? The one Grandma sent for my birthday?" Despite herself, Grace felt a smile tugging at her lips. Yes, you can wear the blue dress. And can you wear your pretty red sweater? The soft one? Grace nodded, running her fingers through Lily's tangled morning hair. If you'd like. I would like, Lily said solemnly. Then her face broke into a sunny smile. It's going to be wonderful, Mommy. You'll see. Grace wished she could share her daughter's certainty. But as she watched Lily skip away to get dressed for school, chattering excitedly about what they would wear and who they might see, she felt a tiny spark of hope flutter in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, Lily was right. She picked up the invitation one more time, running her fingers over the elegant script. The paper felt warm now, like it had absorbed some of Lily's enthusiasm. Grace tucked it carefully into her purse instead of the trash where it had nearly ended up. Just this once, she repeated to herself. And for the first time in days, it didn't feel like giving up. It felt like moving forward. As she helped Lily gather her backpack and lunchbox for school, Grace found herself humming softly, an old habit she'd nearly forgotten in the chaos of recent weeks. Lily joined in, their voices blending in the morning sunshine, and for a moment the weight on Grace's shoulders felt just a little lighter. They stepped out onto the porch together, Lily's hand warm and sure in hers. The autumn air was crisp with possibility, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. Grace squeezed her daughter's hand, drawing strength from her simple faith and pure heart. "Ready for school?" she asked. Lily nodded, then paused. "Are you ready for Saturday?" Grace took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "I'm trying to be. That's okay," Lily said wisely. Sometimes trying is the bravest thing. They walked down the steps together, mother and daughter, each step taking them closer to whatever Saturday would bring. Grace didn't know if she was making the right choice, but with Lily's hand in hers and morning sun on her face, she felt ready to find out. Chapter 19. The Town Gathering. Chapter 18. The Invitation. Scene 2. The town square hummed with activity as people gathered under the crisp autumn sky. Rows of white folding chairs filled the normally empty space, and a small wooden stage had been erected near the old courthouse steps. Curious whispers drifted through the growing crowd as neighbors settled into their seats, many stealing glances at Grace and Lily, who sat near the back. Grace kept her eyes down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton number she usually saved for church, and had helped Lily into her Sunday clothes. Though she'd tried to refuse coming, Lily's pleading eyes had won out. Now, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. "Mommy, look, there's Sam," Lily whispered excitedly, tugging at her sleeve. Grace's breath caught as Samuel Harrington stepped onto the stage. Gone was any trace of the disheveled man who'd sat outside her diner. His tailored charcoal suit fit perfectly, his silver-streaked hair neat and trimmed. Yet something in his eyes, a familiar warmth, made her heart twist painfully. The crowd fell silent as Sam approached the microphone. He cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and looked out over the sea of faces. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the square. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Samuel Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises." He paused, a slight smile touching his lips. "Though for the past few months, you've known me simply as Sam, the homeless man who sat outside Mary's diner." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Several people turned to stare at Grace, who felt her cheeks burning. Lily squeezed her hand. "I came to your town as part of a social experiment," Sam continued. "For years, I've run a charitable foundation, giving millions to various causes. But I began to wonder, how do we really know where help is most needed? How do we identify those with truly generous hearts?" He gestured to his expensive suit. "It's easy to be charitable when you have wealth. It's simple to give from abundance. But what about those who give from their need? Those who show kindness when they themselves are struggling?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some of the diner's regular customers looked down at their hands. "So I disguised myself as a homeless man. I wanted to see how people would treat someone they thought had nothing to offer in return." Sam's voice grew softer, more personal. "I expected to learn about poverty, about social structures, about economic disparities. Instead, I learned about courage, about dignity, about true generosity. Grace felt tears pricking at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously, refusing to cry in front of these people who had judged her so harshly. During my time here, I was ignored by most. Some showed outright hostility. Others offered help, but always with conditions, expecting recognition, demanding my story, wanting something in return. Sam's gaze swept across the crowd, and several people shifted uneasily in their chairs. But there was one person, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, who gave freely with no expectation of return. One person who treated me with dignity when she thought I had nothing to offer. One person who shared what little she had, never asking for recognition or reward. The square grew utterly still. Even the autumn breeze seemed to hold its breath. The only person who gave freely, with no expectation, was Grace Miller. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dozens of heads turned toward Grace, who sat frozen in her chair, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and something else. Something that might have been pride. Chapter 20. Restoring Her Dignity. Chapter 19. The Town Gathering. Scene 2. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Sam stepped up to the microphone, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the shabby clothes he'd worn just weeks ago. The crowd fell silent, hanging on his every word as he began to speak. "I came to this town with a purpose," Sam said, his voice clear and strong. "As the head of the Harrington Foundation, I wanted to understand true compassion. Not the kind that comes with recognition or reward, but the quiet kind that happens when no one is watching." He paused, his eyes finding Grace in the crowd. What I discovered was more than I bargained for. Grace shifted uncomfortably in her chair, feeling the weight of everyone's stares. Lily squeezed her hand tight, offering silent support. "I met a woman," Sam continued, "who worked long hours at the local diner. She had barely enough to feed herself and her daughter, yet when she saw me, a stranger on the street, her first thought was to help." His voice grew thick with emotion. "She didn't just toss me spare change or leftover food. She gave me a fresh, hot meal, and more importantly, she gave me dignity." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people looked down at their feet, remembering their own harsh words and judgments. Each day, Grace Miller would greet me with genuine warmth. She defended me when others whispered cruel things. She taught her daughter Lily to see beyond appearances and judge people by their hearts. Sam's eyes glistened. When her car broke down, she walked 3 miles to work in the rain rather than miss a shift. Yet that same evening, she still brought me a cup of hot coffee because she worried I'd be cold. Grace blinked back tears, remembering those difficult days. Lily leaned against her mother's arm, beaming with pride. While others crossed the street to avoid me, Grace invited me to help her carry groceries. While some complained about my presence, she gave me opportunities to feel useful again. Sam's voice grew stronger. "She did all this while struggling to make ends meet herself. She never asked for anything in return. She never knew who I really was." The crowd stirred uncomfortably as Sam continued. "When I fixed her car, she insisted on paying me with what little she had. When I helped Lily with homework, she made sure I had a proper dinner. Every kindness I showed was returned tenfold, not out of obligation, but out of genuine compassion." Several of the diner's regular customers shifted in their seats, recalling their complaints about Grace's friendship with the supposed homeless man. The waitresses who had gossiped about her stared at their hands, faces flushed with shame. "Then came the revelation of who I really was," Sam said, his voice heavy with regret. "Instead of celebrating Grace's kindness, this town turned on her. You accused her of being calculating when she had been nothing but genuine. You fired her from her job. You allowed her daughter to be bullied at school." The principal of Lily's school dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. Parents hugged their children closer, looking ashamed. "Grace Miller showed me what true wealth looks like," Sam declared, his voice ringing across the square. "It's not about money in the bank or the clothes we wear. It's about having a heart so full of compassion that you give even when you have nothing left to give. It's about teaching your child to see the best in people when the world tells them to expect the worst." Lily bounced in her seat, nodding vigorously. Grace wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, tears streaming down her face. When I offered to help her after revealing my identity, do you know what she said? Sam asked the crowd. She said, "I helped you because you were a man in need, not because of money." Even in her anger and hurt, her integrity shone through. The town mayor removed his glasses, wiping his eyes. The diner's owner hung his head, shoulders slumped with guilt. "I came to test this town's character," Sam's voice softened. "I found it in abundance in one person who had every reason to turn away, to think only of herself, but chose instead to show kindness. Grace Miller is the richest person I know, and this town should be ashamed for how they treated her." A deep silence fell over the crowd. Then, slowly, people began to rise from their chairs. First one, then another, until the entire gathering was on their feet. The applause started softly, but grew into a thunderous ovation. Grace sat frozen in her chair, tears flowing freely down her face as the sound washed over her. Lily jumped up, clapping wildly and shouting, "That's my mom! That's my mom!" The applause continued, growing stronger. Old Mrs. Peterson from the grocery store was openly weeping. The school children who had teased Lily were clapping the loudest, their young faces earnest with regret and admiration. Even the tough-looking teenagers who hung out behind the diner stood respectfully, adding their applause to the chorus. Chapter 21. A New Opportunity. Chapter 20. Restoring Her Dignity. Scene 1. Continued. "I met a woman," Sam continued, "who worked long hours at the diner, barely making ends meet. Yet when she saw someone in need disguised as a homeless man, she didn't hesitate to help." His voice grew softer, filled with emotion. "She gave me warm meals when she could barely afford groceries. She defended my dignity when others mocked. She taught her daughter to see the worth in every person, no matter their circumstances." Grace felt her cheeks flush as whispers rippled through the crowd. Several of her former regular customers at the diner looked down at their feet, unable to meet her eyes. "What makes Grace Miller extraordinary isn't just her kindness," Sam said, straightening his shoulders. "It's her strength. When people criticized her for helping me, she didn't back down. When her job was threatened, she stood firm in her principles." He paused, letting his words sink in. "That's the kind of character we need more of in this world." Lily beamed up at her mother, pride shining in her young eyes. Grace squeezed her daughter's hand, fighting back tears. "Which is why," Sam announced, his voice carrying across the town square, "I want to offer Grace Miller the position of executive director for the new Harrington Foundation branch here in town." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Grace's heart skipped a beat. "This foundation," Sam continued, "will focus on helping those who've fallen on hard times, providing job training, housing assistance, and support for single parents struggling to make ends meet. Who better to lead it than someone who understands firsthand both struggle and compassion?" The mayor, who had been sitting in the front row, stood up and started applauding. Others joined in, the sound growing until it filled the square. Grace noticed Mrs. Henderson, who had fired her from the diner, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Sam stepped down from the podium and walked toward Grace, holding out an envelope. "The position comes with a full benefits package and a salary that will provide stability for you and Lily." His eyes were gentle, apologetic. "I know money can't undo the hurt I caused, but maybe this opportunity can help you help others, the way you helped me." Grace stared at the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. The crowd waited in expectant silence. This was everything she needed: financial security, a chance to make a difference, restoration of her reputation. Yet something held her back. She stood slowly, lifting her chin. "Before I accept," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I need to know something. Is this offer because you feel guilty, Mr. Harrington? Or because you truly believe I'm the right person for the job?" Sam met her gaze directly. "I've interviewed dozens of qualified candidates across the country for positions like this. None of them showed the combination of compassion, integrity, and wisdom that you demonstrated when you thought I was just a homeless man named Sam." He smiled softly. "This isn't charity, Grace. This is recognition of your true worth." Grace glanced down at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at Sam, measuring his sincerity. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. "I'll accept," she said finally, "on one condition." She squared her shoulders. "The foundation needs to focus first on the people in this town who are struggling right now. Not just with money, but with dignity. Everyone deserves to be seen as a person of worth, regardless of their circumstances." Sam's face broke into a genuine smile. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this position." He held out his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Grace looked at his offered hand, remembering how those same fingers had fixed her car and carved a toy for Lily when everyone thought he was penniless. She reached out and shook it firmly. "We have a deal," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Not because you're a billionaire, Mr. Harrington, but because you understand what it means to be seen as human, no matter who you appear to be." The crowd erupted in applause again, but this time Grace stood tall and proud. She had accepted his offer not out of desperation or gratitude, but on her own terms, with her dignity fully intact. Lily hugged her waist tightly, and Grace felt tears of relief and triumph well up in her eyes. Several townspeople stepped forward to congratulate her, including some who had shunned her just days before. But Grace's attention was on Lily's beaming face and the way her daughter whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Mommy." Sam stepped back, giving Grace her moment of triumph. She had transformed his offer of charity into a partnership of equals, and in doing so had proven once again why she was exactly the person his foundation needed. Chapter 22. A Fresh Start. Chapter 22. New Beginnings, Scene 1. The Harrington Foundation's new office sparkled in the morning sunlight. Grace stood at the entrance, keys in hand, taking a deep breath. The brass nameplate by the door read, "Grace Miller, Executive Director." Her fingers traced the letters, still hardly believing this was real. Inside, the space was both welcoming and practical. Warm beige walls and comfortable chairs filled the waiting area. Down the hall, meeting rooms stood ready for job training sessions and support groups. Everything about it said hope and fresh start, exactly what Grace wanted to create for others. "Mommy, can I put this here?" Lily asked, holding up a framed photo of the three of them from the autumn fair, Grace, Lily, and Sam, all smiling with cotton candy. "That's perfect, sweetheart," Grace said, watching Lily carefully place it on the desk. The memory no longer stung. Instead, it reminded her that sometimes blessings came in unexpected packages. The first volunteers arrived early. Martha from the grocery store and Tom from the hardware shop. Both had once whispered about Grace, but now they stood before her with genuine eagerness to help. "I brought coffee and donuts," Martha said, setting down a box. "Thought we could use some fuel for our first day." Her smile was apologetic, trying to make amends for past judgments. "Thank you," Grace replied warmly. "Let's set them up in the break room for everyone." More volunteers trickled in, faces she recognized from around town, some who had crossed the street to avoid her when she walked with Sam. Now they listened intently as she outlined their first projects: a job skills workshop, a food pantry, and emergency housing assistance. "We'll start by identifying the most urgent needs in our community," Grace explained, standing at the whiteboard. Her voice was steady, confident. "Sometimes people just need a chance, someone to believe in them when nobody else will." The words came naturally because she'd lived them. She knew what it meant to struggle, to face judgment, to need a helping hand, but she also knew the power of dignity and second chances. As the morning progressed, people began arriving for help. A young mother with 2 small children, looking as overwhelmed as Grace had once felt. An elderly man who'd lost his job. A teenager who'd aged out of foster care. Grace met each person with the same compassion she'd shown Sam. "Let's start by hearing your story," she'd say, offering coffee and respect in equal measure. The volunteers followed her lead. Tom helped the elderly man update his resume. Martha worked with the young mother to arrange childcare so she could attend job interviews. The atmosphere hummed with purpose and kindness. During lunch break, Lily helped arrange the food pantry, carefully organizing cans and boxes. "Just like you taught me, Mommy. Everything neat so people can find what they need." Grace watched her daughter with pride. The past months had taught Lily more about compassion and resilience than any lecture could have. By afternoon, word had spread. More townspeople arrived, not seeking help but offering it. Mrs. Jenkins from the bakery brought day-old bread for the food pantry. Mr. Rodriguez offered to teach basic car maintenance classes. The same community that had once shunned them now rallied around their cause. "We could use some volunteers for Saturday's clothing drive," Grace mentioned during the afternoon meeting. Every hand in the room went up. As she worked through paperwork later, Grace noticed familiar faces passing by her office window. The diner regulars who'd complained about her, the neighbors who'd spread gossip, now they waved, some stopping in to ask how they could help. The foundation was becoming more than just a charity. It was healing the town itself, bringing people together across the divisions of privilege and prejudice. Near closing time, Grace stood in the doorway, watching volunteers chat as they gathered their belongings. The day's accomplishments filled several pages in her notebook: 20 food boxes distributed, 15 job applications completed, 3 emergency housing situations resolved. But the real success was in the smaller moments: the dignity restored to a discouraged job seeker, the relief on a struggling parent's face, the way volunteers and clients alike left standing a little taller. Through the front window, Grace caught a glimpse of Sam watching from his car across the street. He'd kept his distance all day, letting her establish herself on her own terms. But she could see the pride in his expression, the love in his eyes as he observed what she'd created. Their gazes met briefly. Grace smiled and gave a small wave. Sam nodded in return, his face glowing with admiration for the woman who had once shown kindness to a stranger and was now teaching an entire town to do the same. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Grace knew she'd found her true calling. Not just helping those in need, but showing others how to open their hearts as well. She'd turned judgment into compassion, suspicion into support, and in doing so had transformed not only her own life, but the life of her community. Sam continued watching from his car, his heart full. The woman who had given him a warm meal on a cold night was now giving hope to an entire town. In trying to test others' character, he'd found someone who had taught him what character truly meant. The foundation's sign caught the last rays of sunlight, casting a warm glow over the words, "Harrington Foundation, Building Hope Together." But it was Grace's presence inside that truly made it shine. Her spirit of unconditional kindness, now multiplied through every person who walked through those doors. Chapter 23. Opening Her Heart. Chapter 22. A Fresh Start, Scene 2. The autumn evening painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks as Sam's car pulled up to Grace's modest house. He carried a brown paper bag filled with fresh groceries, his heart beating a little faster as he walked up the familiar path to her door. The past few weeks had changed everything, yet some things remained beautifully the same, like the warmth that filled him whenever he visited. Grace opened the door before he could knock, wiping her hands on her apron. The kitchen behind her smelled of home-cooked comfort food. "Right on time," she said with a gentle smile. "Lily's been watching for your car since she finished her homework." "Sam!" Lily's excited voice rang out as she bounded down the hallway, practically tackling him with a hug. He had to juggle the grocery bag to keep it from falling. "Careful there, sweetheart," Grace laughed, taking the bag from him. "Let's at least let him get through the door first." The kitchen was warm and inviting, with steam rising from pots on the stove. Grace had learned that Sam, despite his wealth, preferred simple meals shared with people he cared about. Tonight, she'd made her grandmother's chicken and dumplings recipe, the same meal she'd first offered him outside the diner all those months ago. "Can I help?" Sam asked, rolling up his sleeves. The expensive watch on his wrist caught the light, but his manner was as humble as ever. "You can help me set the table," Lily announced, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the cabinet where they kept the plates. It was a familiar routine now, Lily directing traffic while Sam carefully carried dishes to the small dining table. Grace watched them, her heart full. The betrayal she'd felt upon learning Sam's true identity had faded, replaced by understanding. His deception had started as a test of character, but it had become something real, a chance for all of them to learn about true worth and genuine connection. "Remember when you taught me to fold the napkins like boats?" Lily chatted as she worked alongside Sam. "Can we do that again?" "Of course," Sam replied, his eyes crinkling with warmth as he demonstrated the folds. His fingers, once calloused from odd jobs around town, were softer now, but his gentleness remained unchanged. Grace brought the food to the table, and they settled into their seats. The simple pleasure of sharing a meal together felt like a gift. Sam asked Lily about school, listening intently as she described her art project and the new friend she'd made. Grace noticed how he never checked his phone or seemed distracted. Here, he was just Sam, not the billionaire philanthropist the rest of the world knew. "Mrs. Turner said I did the best job on my math homework," Lily announced proudly. "I told her it was because you taught me your special tricks." Sam's eyes met Grace's across the table. They both remembered those early days when he'd helped Lily with homework on diner napkins, neither of them knowing where it would lead. "You did all the hard work," Sam said modestly. "I just showed you a few shortcuts." After dinner, Lily insisted on showing Sam her latest drawings. She'd created a whole series about their adventures together. The autumn fair, the wooden toy he'd carved, even the day of the town gathering where everything had changed. "This one's my favorite," Lily declared, holding up a crayon drawing of the three of them. In her childish style, she'd drawn them all holding hands, huge smiles on their faces. "See? We're all happy together." Grace felt tears prick at her eyes. The simple truth in Lily's words touched something deep in her heart. She caught Sam watching her, his expression soft with understanding. Later, after they'd cleared the dishes and Lily had run off to feed her pet goldfish, Sam and Grace stood in the kitchen together. The familiar comfort of doing dishes side by side reminded Grace of how far they'd come. "Thank you," Sam said quietly, drying a plate with careful attention. "For giving me another chance. For seeing past my mistakes." Grace passed him another dish, their fingers brushing slightly. "Thank you for showing us that sometimes what looks like an ending can be a beginning instead." The evening wound down slowly, like a gentle stream finding its path. They sat in the living room, Lily between them on the couch, reading her favorite story. The little girl's head gradually drooped until she was dozing against Sam's shoulder. "I should get her to bed," Grace whispered. But Sam carefully adjusted Lily so she could sleep more comfortably. "Let her rest a little longer," he murmured. In the soft lamplight, Grace could see the contentment on his face, the way he'd found peace in these simple moments. When it was finally time for Sam to leave, Lily stirred from her half-sleep. She wrapped her arms around his neck in a tight hug, and in that drowsy, honest way of children she whispered, "Mommy says you're our blessing." Chapter 24. The Happily Ever After. Chapter 24. The Garden of New Beginnings. The spring morning sparkled with promise as the sun rose over the newly renovated community center. Dew glistened on fresh grass, and birds sang cheerfully from nearby trees. Grace stood in the garden area, her hands on her hips, surveying the empty flower beds, waiting to be filled with life. "Mom, look what Sam brought!" Lily's excited voice carried across the lawn as she helped Sam unload trays of colorful flowers from his truck. Her pink dress swished around her knees as she carefully carried a flat of bright yellow marigolds. Grace smiled, watching her daughter's face light up with joy. Just 6 months ago, their world had seemed so dark. Now, here they were, surrounded by hope and new beginnings. "These will look perfect along the walkway," Sam said, setting down more flowers. He wore simple jeans and a work shirt, looking more like the man Grace had first met than the billionaire businessman he truly was. Somehow, that made her heart warm even more. People began arriving in 2s and 3s, carrying garden tools and wheelbarrows. Mrs. Jenkins from the bakery brought coffee and fresh donuts. Mr. Rodriguez, who owned the hardware store, arrived with his whole family, their arms full of gardening supplies. "Where do you want us to start, Grace?" asked Sarah Thompson, who had once whispered cruel gossip, but now looked at Grace with genuine respect. Grace pulled out the garden plan she'd drawn up. "Let's plant the tall flowers in the back, near the building. The shorter ones can go along the paths." She pointed to different areas. "We want to make sure everyone who comes to the center feels welcome right from the start." Lily tugged on Sam's sleeve. "Can I help you plant the roses? Please?" Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Of course, sunshine," Sam replied, ruffling her hair. "But remember what I taught you about the thorns?" "Wear gloves and be careful," Lily recited proudly, already pulling on her pink gardening gloves. The morning hummed with activity. People chatted and laughed as they dug holes and carefully placed flowers in the rich soil. The air filled with the sweet scent of earth and blooms. Grace moved among the volunteers, offering guidance and encouragement. She caught snippets of conversation about the center's programs, the food pantry, job training classes, after-school tutoring. Her heart swelled with pride knowing how many lives would be touched by this place. "Remember when you first helped me carry those grocery bags?" Sam asked quietly, appearing beside her with a tray of petunias. Grace nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "You were just Sam then. No fancy title, no wealth, just a kind man who needed help." "And you gave it freely?" he replied, his voice gentle. "That's why this center works, Grace. Because you understand that everyone deserves dignity and kindness." Lily's voice rang out across the garden. "Look, the butterfly bush is already bringing friends." Sure enough, a bright monarch butterfly danced around the purple blooms she'd just planted. More townspeople arrived as the morning went on. The mayor stopped by with his family. Teachers from Lily's school came to help. Even Grace's former boss from the diner showed up, looking sheepish but eager to contribute. "This is what community looks like," Grace murmured, watching everyone work together. "Not judgments or gossip, but people helping people." Sam squeezed her shoulder gently. "You taught them that, Grace. You showed them what real wealth means." The garden took shape as the morning progressed. Bright zinnias and cosmos lined the walkways. Climbing roses began their journey up the trellises. Herbs filled raised beds that would later supply the center's cooking classes. Around noon, Mrs. 2. Jenkins called everyone to take a break. Tables appeared, loaded with sandwiches and cookies. People sat in groups on the grass, sharing food and stories. Lily sat with a group of children, teaching them the names of the flowers they'd planted. Her face glowed with pride as she explained about butterflies and bees, repeating facts Sam had taught her. "She's blooming here too," Grace said softly, watching her daughter. "Just like these flowers." Sam nodded. "You both are. And you've helped this whole town grow." The afternoon sun cast long shadows as the last plants went into the ground. People stepped back to admire their work. The once empty beds now burst with color and life. "Time for the dedication," the mayor announced, gathering everyone around the center's entrance. Grace felt tears welling up as she looked at the beautiful garden and the faces of her neighbors, no longer strangers or critics, but friends. She thought about that cold autumn night when she'd first offered a meal to a seemingly homeless man, how that one act of kindness had grown into something so much bigger. Sam stepped forward, holding Lily's hand. Grace felt her heart overflow with love for both of them. She reached for Sam's other hand, and he took it, his eyes shining with understanding. As she stood there, surrounded by flowers and friendship, Grace realized that true wealth had nothing to do with money in the bank. It lived in the smile of a child, in hands joined in work and love, in hearts open to helping others. It bloomed, like these flowers, when nurtured with kindness and care. Through her happy tears, Grace squeezed Sam's hand and smiled, knowing that their garden of new beginnings would keep growing, season after season, touching lives with the simple power of love shared freely. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Grace Miller, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.